The D&D Adventure System is a series of cooperative board games with classic dungeon delving flavor. Each core game entry features a large assortment of unpainted miniatures representing heroes, villains, minions, and monsters, along with other components that could find use in tabletop role-playing games. These board games are a great way to expand your miniature collection and a fun painting challenge. In this video, I will give a review from the perspective of a dungeon master and mini painter of the miniatures that come within the Tomb of Annihilation board game. I will share what I like and do not like about the models, as well as discuss their usefulness within D&D and abroad in the greater world of miniature gaming. I will also touch upon my experience painting these models and give my thoughts on the end results of those efforts. This will not be a review of the game itself, but rather the components. Now let's first get an overview of the board game. Releasing in the latter half of 2017, alongside an adventure module of the same name, the Tomb of Annihilation sits as the 5th entry in the D&D Adventure System series. The adventure is inspired by the Tomb of Horrors, which is an infamous dungeon where players go to die. In the game, players explore the jungles of Chult and their ruins in search of a source to a magical plague that is affecting the world. This board game's assortment of miniatures have an overall jungle theme featuring foes as well as playable characters that are quite exotic. This game comes with 42 miniatures. I've divided them into 4 categories: heroes, undead, peoples of Chult, and beasts. As normal, let's start with the heroes. First up is my favorite from the group, Qawasha, the human druid. The model depicts an unarmored male human wielding a staff topped with a thorny headpiece. My favorite part of the model is the clothing, which stands apart from most other miniatures I have. Qawasha's vest is textured with lateral stripes. His bracers have a crisp, scaly pattern, and the sort of blanket skirt wrapped about his waist is lined with little tassels along the edges. I chose an earthy array of greens, browns, and yellows for the outfit. To contrast the clothing, I painted the necklace gold. Qawasha's weapon is pretty cool. It looks like what would happen if someone added a lot of spikes to a ball-headed war club and then turned that into a staff. A fitting weapon for a druid, but Qawasha could easily pass for a monk due to the simple weapons and lack of armor. This would make a cool representation for a player character, but could be even more useful as an NPC due to the pose, which I describe as static but stoic. It fits the character well. Next up is the other human in the category, Artus Cimber, the Ranger. The model depicts a lightly armored male human with his bow drawn. The details on this miniature are less sharp than the previous hero. Despite that, this is another one of my favorites. Once again, it is the outfit that won me over. The clothes look like those of a simple commoner with a little armor on the upper legs and shoulders. It is not every day that you get a model that can pass as townsfolk. I'm excited at the prospect of using this mini to represent a town militia member. In some ways, the model reminds me of Aragorn from the Lord of the Rings movies. Aragorn's ranger outfit ended up being the inspiration for the paint job. For players, this model can pass for a ranger, rogue, lightly armored fighter, and maybe even a bard. For dungeon masters, this model will be great as an armed townsman, a hunter on the fringes of civilization, or maybe a highwayman stealing from travelers on the open road. This model has options, and that makes it valuable in a miniature collection. The next 3 heroes are of more exotic species. First among these is Dragonbait, the Saurial Paladin. The miniature depicts what appears to be a dinosaur humanoid wearing a simple tunic and cape while wielding a sword. I stuck fairly close to the official artwork colors when painting this miniature. It is a rather unique model. I had never heard of Saurials in D&D, and the name Dragonbait is weird, so I did a little research. It was the bare minimum. I went to the Forgotten Realms wiki. This character and species go way back to an adventure module, some novels, and other Forgotten Realms products from the 80s and 90s. Apparently, Dragonbait is a pure-hearted, righteous dinosaur guy. But that is not what I want to talk about. Instead, I want to discuss my first impressions and interpretations of what this character could be. You see, when I first opened this board game, I did not know Dragonbait was a pre-existing character. All I had to go off of was the name, the model, and this brief description on the character tile. As a Sariel, you cannot speak, but instead communicate through sense. You are here in Chult with your friend Artus Cimber to watch his back and help lift the death curse that bedevils Toril. The first line establishes a language barrier, and the second line makes me feel like this character is a sidekick. And then there is the pejorative name Dragonbait. All of this culminates into what I think a Sariel named Dragonbait is: a victim. His exotic species makes him an other in society, and his inability to speak further isolates him. I imagine that an unsavory band of explorers took this Sariel under their wing, but not out of the goodness of their heart, but rather to take advantage of him. The Sariel could not speak and did not understand their language as far as the crooked band of Tomb Raiders could tell. No, they named him Dragonbait because that is what he was to them. Expendable. Dragonbait was always the first to test the stability of a rickety bridge, always the first to enter the trapped corridor, always the first to descend into the den of the beast. And yet, despite all odds, Dragonbait always triumphed. In my eyes, Dragonbait is the silent, competent sidekick that outlives his prideful, cruel partners. Hopefully one day he will find true friends, or maybe he already has in the form of Artus Cimber. Anyway, that is my version of this character. Leave a comment down below if you recognize Dragonbait from those products in the 80s and 90s. 5 points to you if you do. That was kind of a depressing interpretation. We need something uplifting. We need a funny cat clip. Speaking of cats, the next miniature is the Tabaxi Minstrel. This model depicts a feline humanoid playing the lute. This is my first Tabaxi miniature, and what a good one it is. I painted the fur light beige with dark brown spots. I chose a vibrant cerulean blue for the shirt, light green for the baggy pants, and an orange-brown for the bracer on the right arm, and wrapped cloth that appears on the legs and ankles. I used copper paint for the bracelet and what appears to be 5 pieces of a necklace. My collection is running thin on Bard miniatures, so this model has some bonus value to me. Having the model posed playing their lute is nice, as the few miniatures I own that visibly have musical instruments usually have them stowed away on their backs. The Tabaxi Minstrel is a cool model. I don't foresee it being used for much other than a player character bard or an NPC member of the band in a tavern, though. The last hero included in the Tomb of Annihilation board game is Asharra, the Aarakocra wizard. The model depicts a winged bird humanoid mid-leap or mid-flight wielding a spear. The rather large decorated mantle resting on the creature's shoulders and chest was giving me ancient Egyptian royalty vibes, so I chose some vibrant blues for the clothes, gold for the mantle, and copper for the spear. To contrast the clothes, I went with a blend of red and orange for the feathers. The result looks like some sort of Egyptian god with fiery phoenix-colored feathers. The pose has some action, which I like. I also like that the wings are rather compact. Sometimes wings make a model difficult to store or move around on the tabletop. Big wings on a miniature, it's the same effect as a guy carrying a shovel over his shoulder and turning around, smacking everyone in the vicinity. The board game states this character is a wizard, but it could pass for all sorts of lightly armored classes. Actually, because it's a flying creature, it probably always needs to be lightly armored. This one will probably just work for any Aarakocra player. That brings an end to the heroes of the board game. Now we move on to the Undead. Every ancient jungle temple needs a host of skeleton guards, and this game comes with 4. Each skeleton bears 2 curved daggers and lamellar armor in the form of pauldrons and a belt with armor in the front and cloth skirt on the sides and back. One of these skeletons, labeled as the Skeleton Key, has a tall hat-like protrusion atop its skull that has a plus shape when viewed from above. I suspect this is for a puzzle involving a large room filled with hordes of skeletons, one of which must be slain and its skull literally used as a key to open a door. If that idea does not suit you though, it could also just be a strange helmet. Maybe it has cultural significance to the people that built this jungle temple. Maybe it just means that this was the captain of the guards that were turned into skeleton guards to guard the temple forever. Guardity guard. These rattling undead guards turned out better than my last batch of skeletons. I chose a drab brown for the cloth skirts and a bronze base coat for the metal features. The weapons and armor received a heavy coat of green wash to simulate a dull verdigris corrosion that the metal would surely accumulate in damp jungle ruins. Skeletons are useful minis for a DM to have in their arsenal. The presence of armor and clothing adds variety and makes these skeletons much more desirable. The game includes 3 Chultan Zombie miniatures. The sculpt depicts a standing undead human wearing what appears to be monk robes over their shriveled skin, which is stretched tight over their bony figure. I painted each of them with a different undead skin tone. I took a similar route with their robes, painting one of them yellow, another brownish red, and the third an orange brown. These are my favorite D&D zombies so far, and it is mainly because of the clothes. This is becoming a pattern. The things I like the most about this set are the outfits. They look different from much of what I already have. Diversity keeps things interesting. It is nice to get away from European-style clothes for once. As far as how useful these Chultan zombies are, well, they're zombies. Zombies are always fun, and as far as zombie miniatures go, these are more interesting than others, so these are good zombies. 2 thumbs up. The remaining undead in this category are named characters. The miniature for the villainous Ras Nsi depicts a creature with the lower body of a coiled snake and a bandaged humanoid upper body. He wears a golden mantle and bracers and bears a greatsword, although it looks more like a longsword in his hands. Ras Nsi is an undead Yuan Ti Malison and the last of the original 7 Bere, which were undying holy rulers of the lost Chultan city of Mesro. Sir, this is a Wendy's. Oh, I know. I just wanted to tell you about Ras Nsi. You're blocking up the line. Are you going to order anything? No. I don't think I will. This is the creature featured prominently on the box of this board game, and honestly, I thought this model would be bigger, but the modelers managed to fit Nsi on a medium-sized base. I painted the skin taupe, the bandages cream, and the scales a reddish brown. I took a stab at replicating the faded scales seen in the artwork by using a brick highlight, but it did not come out right, so I went back to reddish brown. The mantle that adorns Nsi's shoulders and upper chest got a layer of gold, but I missed the bracers, instead painting them to look like more bandages. On one hand, he could have looked more royal, but I find those bandages to be very interesting. They do not cover the whole body, so Nsi is not a mummified, reanimated corpse. That leaves me to believe that these bandages are an attempt to shore up damage to his undead form, or to protect him from further injury. According to the Forgotten Realms wiki, Nsi possesses regeneration abilities, but these bandages give me the sense that that regeneration is not completely working. From a character standpoint, I find it very intriguing to have this character's body slowly failing despite its undying nature. Another awesome detail is the bandage over one of his eyes, which could be interpreted as meaning this creature is blind. Imagine a party of adventurers trapped in a maze being hunted down by a blind zombie Yuan Ti. Every step the heroes take, echoing through the stone halls. Every puddle may as well be a landmine. This is a very cool model of an intriguing character. Ras Nsi certainly is a highlight of the set. Next is Valindra Shadowmantle. The model depicts a robed woman wearing a hooded cloak and bearing a staff shaped like a hook on top. Valindra apparently is a lich with a position high up in a powerful wizard guild. I painted the mini with a dark color scheme, making use of purple for the lower robes and black for the cloak. Stepping away from the official artwork, I chose gray skin for this undead wizard. In hindsight, I wish I painted the model with more lively, colorful skin, but on the bright side, that gray skin makes her look like a changeling wizard. The sculpt is pretty simple. The pose is not particularly eye-catching. The staff stands out though with that hooked shape. This mini is pretty generic, but that is not a bad thing. It means the model has options. How you paint it will narrow down its uses on the tabletop. It is nice to have a female wizard miniature in this game's assortment. The overall villain of the Tomb of Annihilation is the lich Asharra. I feel like that second ER in his name is superfluous. I prefer Asharra over Asharra. That extra ER is like a dog barking. Sorry, I don't know what came over me. Asharra is a very powerful, very evil undead spellcaster, and this miniature does him justice. The model is of a skeletal wizard wearing a tall fluted and horned helmet, possibly made of bone, with billowing robes and a crooked staff with what appears to be a skull and spinal column fastened to the top. The model is posed, drawing a stream of magical smoke out of the ground into his hand, while the eye holes of his skull staff emit even more magic smoke. If this miniature looks familiar, it is because it is based off of the cover art of the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. I love this image, and I'm so glad that this board game included a model of this character in that pose. Painting this mini was easy and fun. I kept it simple with black robes, using a dark gray highlight over the top. I used bronze for the pointy shoulder pieces and the amulet over his chest. I settled on a dull beige for Asharra's skin or bones, and that made it easy to differentiate his body from the lighter colored bone helmet. For the wispy magic features, I would have gone with purple or magenta if this component was transparent. It was not though, so I decided a chaotic mix of those colors with some added cerulean blue would look better. It came out awesome. Liches make some of my favorite villains in D&D, and this is one of the coolest ones. Asharra is probably my favorite miniature out of the entire box. That is all for undead miniatures. Now it is time to move on to the hostile peoples living in the jungles of Chult. First up, we have some Batiri goblins. The miniatures depict short, slender goblins wearing clothes made of jungle leaves and wielding short swords or daggers. In the past, I've mentioned how I do not like it when goblin miniatures have really big heads. I was happy to see that is not the case for these goblins, but they do have slender, almost elongated skulls. I can get over that, but their hair, it's bound in these straight rod shapes that jut directly out behind from their heads, and I just don't like that look. One detail that I do like is the leaf clothes, which give the goblins a more wild look that I wish was more common among goblin miniatures. I like to think that goblins are more tribal and wild when they're not under the thumb of the more disciplined hobgoblins. These minis are unique, but not my favorite. While on the topic of short creatures, I might as well go over the Vegapygmies. The models kind of look like goblins, but a closer look will reveal that their heads are smoother and more egg-shaped. The board game comes with 4 of them, all wielding spears, with one being the chief. They wear clothes, but the details are fuzzy. The chief, however, has a large hat that appears to be made of long leaves. I read the label Vegapygmy, assumed these were plant people, and then proceeded to paint them green. They are actually a type of fungus people, like myconids, but different. Had I known that going into painting them, I would have chosen maybe a cream or white color. The quality of the Vegapygmy minis is poor. That could be because of the sculpt, or just the fact that they are small minis. Either way, I am not impressed. At least they can be repurposed as part of a goblin horde. Stepping back to medium-sized humanoids again, we come to the 3 fire newts. They are cruel salamander people with the ability to breathe fire, but this depiction has them conjuring flames in their claws. The models are pretty simple. They wear metal belts and have a layered plate pauldron on one side. I painted their smooth skin red with spots of black, orange, or yellow. The yellow spots are my favorite. The fire newts are simple but show some promise. They could be deployed alongside lizard folk as spellcasters. Maybe I will use them in a quest where a hag tasks the party to bring her the eye of a fire newt, only to surprise the players with a small settlement of these fire-slinging salamander people. Now, the hag would have normally asked for eye of plain old boring normal newts, but she's had a day. The kids escaped the cauldron, now she's got to do some last-minute shopping for new groceries. I mean, she's got to have kids to eat. She's got to eat kids. That's what hags do. On top of that whole debacle, the house that walks, that she lives in, it stubbed its toe. It's been a bad day for the hag. Just get her the Eye of Fire Newt. She needs to treat herself. Eye of Normal Newt is like here, and Eye of Fire Newt is like up here on the scale of deliciousness. Okay? You don't know until you've tried it. The last of this category are more beast than people, but they are part of a society. They are the 1T Brood Guard. The models depict scaly reptilian humanoids standing with their backs hunched, heads and necks in a forward-leaning position, and their tongues curled, hanging down from tooth-filled mouths. It is a familiar visage, one that mimics my own. The 1T are a race of serpent-human hybrids. Occasionally, they attempt to transform human prisoners as well as faithful servants into something closer to their kind. The failed transformations result in primal reptilian beasts. Those unfortunate beings become members of the Brood Guard and are tasked with guarding the eggs of the 1T. This model stands as the most detailed in the category, with an intricate scale texture all over its body. In the past, I painted a giant snake miniature with a green back and eggshell underside. I reused that color scheme here. These are an interesting addition. As a dungeon master, I want to deploy them as the degenerate remnants of a fallen reptilian empire that now roam crumbling jungle ruins. These models will work well to represent 1T and their kin, but it would not be that far of a stretch to use them as lizard folk or troglodytes. I could also see them being used as alien life in a futuristic role-playing game. The Brood Guard minis are more useful than I initially thought. That is all for the hostile people of the jungle. Now we move on to more wild creatures. We start this category with the Sioux monsters, of which the game provides 3. The miniature is of a man-sized monkey with little to no hair on its chest, head, and back. One detail I like is how you can see the bumps of their spine showing through the skin on their back. Their faces are also well sculpted, with a look that reminds me of goblins or maybe Gollum from the Lord of the Rings movies. When I first saw these in the box, I was disinterested, but over the course of painting them, they grew on me. In usual fashion, I painted each with a different color scheme. One ended up a dark beige and brown, another had more orange hair, and the last is red and yellow. I prefer the last one for that extra color. Sioux monsters are basically evil monkeys. It is a simple idea but makes for a unique encounter. I think this model could also be used to represent a monkey demon or maybe even an exotic form of vampire spawn. The face has this sunkenness to it that reads a bit as undead, and the ears look pointy even though they actually are not. This is an interesting miniature. A very specific creature, but it'll probably fill a void in many miniature collections. Next we have what I consider to be the second worst miniature in the entire game, the Zorbos.
Wow!
What the are these? These are Zorbos, that's what they are, and I don't like them. The miniatures depict small koala or bear-like creatures sitting in the classic teddy bear pose. I painted them with the same colors as the Sioux monsters. I just don't like this creature. They don't look interesting, and from what I read about Zorbos, they sound annoying. They are basically man-eating koalas that absorb protective powers from the environment, magic, and also they have the ability to turn magic items to dust. All that power in something vaguely cute. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I wouldn't mind having one in my collection to use as like a bear cub or a koala for an odd scenario, but 3 of them? Really? I don't need 3 Zorbos. This is like the Ewok of this board game. They even look like them too. At least the name is fun to say. Frickin' Zorbos, am I right? Here we have some more small creatures in the form of 3 velociraptors. They are small bipedal dinosaurs with 2 short front arms. They are smaller than I expected, having the stature of a medium-sized dog, but that makes them a good enemy to throw at a low-level party that wants to fight dinosaurs. I decided to paint them blue and yellow. 2 of them got a blue base coat with yellow stripes, and the third got a yellow base coat with blue stripes. The paint job is so simple that I went through the trouble to try and paint teeth along the sides of the mouths. I used a single stray bristle and some clumpy white paint to get this minuscule detail. The velociraptors are fast to paint and fun creatures to have minis of. A party of adventurers may find themselves stalked by a pack of these during their trek through the jungle. They could also serve as exotic mounts. Maybe a tribe of goblins have domesticated velociraptors for hunting and travel purposes. These little dinosaurs have potential. The velociraptors are not the only dinosaur miniatures in this game. Included are 2 large-sized pterofolk miniatures. The models depict pterodactyls, but with a slightly more humanoid body standing with wings held open. I painted them both red with a lighter brick color for the wings, and black or yellow stripes along the back, chest, arms, and legs. One thing I neglected to do was give the wings a more intricate coloration. These large swaths of space would look great with stripy veins and gradients of color. These could and probably will be used as pterodactyls more often than pterofolk. They will make for a good aerial encounter and, like the velociraptors, show promise as yet another exotic mount. There is no doubt that these are an interesting beast to have in a miniature collection. Next up is a model of a big, white-haired, pale-skinned, 4-armed, tusked gorilla known as a Giralon. I painted it almost exactly like the official 5th edition artwork, of which the body of this model appears to be based upon. The 5th edition artwork has scaled down the lower 2 arms compared to previous depictions. I don't like this change. It does not feel as menacing and looks kind of weird. I consider this to be a very obscure creature, and yet somehow I already have 2 miniatures of it. I don't need a 3rd. I didn't need the 2nd to begin with. I'm surprised I still have it. This would be a great creature for a boss fight in the jungle, or maybe on a snowy mountaintop where the white fur provides some camouflage. Perhaps the attacking army has captured a couple of these beasts and plans to unleash them upon the enemy castle right before they assault the walls. Having extra arms makes this creature look quite alien, so it could definitely see play in a sci-fi role-playing game. Maybe the heroes land their spaceship on an alien planet and immediately get attacked by one of these. As far as animated statues go, this next miniature is a beast. It's not actually a beast, but it had to go in a category, so it's going with the beasts. The giant four-armed gargoyle is exactly what the name describes. It has an intimidatingly tall posture, although my copy is leaning a bit too far forward. I find the sculpt to be just okay. The overall proportions and pose feel reminiscent of the simpler miniatures of the past. This is not necessarily a bad thing for this specific creature. Maybe the people that crafted this statue were limited in the detail they could create, or maybe erosion has taken its toll on this stone body. This model could be painted all sorts of ways to turn it into a demon or devil, but I think it is best painted like a stone or metal statue. I painted mine with a dark gray stone color scheme, but I wonder what it would look like with a copper or marble color scheme. Those would be really cool. Why didn't I do that? As it is, this model is perfect for representing the animated stone guardian of an ancient tomb. The last model is also technically not a beast, but metaphorically, it is a beast. The Stone Juggernaut is basically a huge, magically animated stone steamroller. This is one of the heaviest, most dense models I have ever encountered. This thing must be a solid block of plastic. Painting it is simple, but there's so much surface area that it just ends up being a slog. I went with a basic mossy stone color scheme, starting with a dark gray base followed with a light gray highlight, and then topping it all off with a splotchy green overbrushing. Actual 3D moss effects would look much better. In my opinion, this is the worst miniature in the Tomb of Annihilation board game. It is big, it is heavy, and most importantly, not that useful. How many times is a dungeon master going to use a juggernaut, and how many of those encounters actually need miniatures on the tabletop? The whole idea of the juggernaut is that it's basically an indestructible magical machine. If the juggernaut finds itself in a combat encounter, it is almost certainly not the thing the players are fighting. This is more of a trap than a monster. In place of what would usually be the biggest, coolest model in the board game, unfortunately, we have a boring paperweight. I don't see the appeal of this miniature, and that kind of brings me to my overall thoughts on this entry to the series. I almost did not buy this board game for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I heard the miniature quality was significantly lower than other games in the series. Having seen the models firsthand, I partially agree. As far as detail goes, it is a mixed bag, with some lacking much detail at all, and others being much more crisp and feature-rich than I was expecting. The plastic, though, is definitely different from that of any official D&D miniature I have ever seen. It has more of a matte finish and is also harder, which may sound good at first, but in actuality makes thinner features brittle. I bought this game used, and it may have been rough play on the previous owner's part, but one of the wings of the Aarakocra mini had snapped off, and two of the ankles on the Velociraptors were broken. I don't think that damage would have occurred if these minis were made of the flexible, softer plastic of previous entries in the series. The second reason why I almost skipped out on the Tomb of Annihilation is the jungle theme. Overall, the assortment of miniatures here is pretty specific, and a part of me just does not want to dedicate storage space to half of these models. I did not need or want Vegapygmies, Fire Newts, or a Juggernaut. And don't get me started on the Zorbos. Frickin' Zorbos. Wow. But the thing is, the other half of the miniatures are cool and very useful. The Tomb of Annihilation board game has an overall weaker assortment of minis, but that's not the only component to consider. I always like to talk about the dungeon tiles that come with these board games, so let's do that now. This time, the tiles are split between weighty stone corridors of what I assume to be a monolithic temple and dense jungle paths. That is right. Finally, we have interlocking tiles depicting outdoor areas that are not scaled down like the town tiles in the Temple of Elemental Evil board game. You can use these tiles to throw together a quick maze of stone corridors or a winding network of paths through the dark jungle floor. Or, my favorite, combine them to represent a crumbling temple with collapsed sections that the outside jungle has seemingly burrowed into. These tiles could see play in the tabletop role-playing game version of D&D, where they are great for generating random dungeons. The models of this board game might not win you over, but maybe these tiles will. I think they are the best in the series so far. So that is the Tomb of Annihilation board game. The game comes with a bunch of components useful to a dungeon master in the form of unpainted miniatures and dungeon tiles. The set has an overall jungle theme, which is nice, but may not be what the average miniature collector is looking for. Some of the minis are really cool, especially the heroes and villains, while others I found to be lackluster. These games are a great source of unpainted official Dungeons & Dragons models, but I see the Tomb of Annihilation as the weakest entry in the series. It has some good, it has some bad, but what do you think? Please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you did not, then tell me why. If you want to see more content, then steamroll that subscribe button using the Juggernaut and do it quick. There's a Zorbo in the way. 5 points if you steamroll the Zorbo. Wow. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep making and keep demolish that Zorbo. I want Zorbo pancakes, okay?
Oh dear, it appears the Juggernaut has steamrolled another 5 Zorbos.
Steamroll that Zorbo. 10 points. I'll do it. I'm running out of hard drive space.